Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you don't already know, my name is Chelsea Dawn Kahn, and we are here today to talk about dread. And legitimately, I have been really highly not looking forward to making this video because who wants to talk about the non-fun emotions, right? That's not a good time, but it's very important for us to be aware that not bad emotions, like we talked about before. They're just indicators, and it's very important for us to be able to recognize and accept them. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Just so you know, I am clothed. For some reason, I just look like a head and shoulders today, but I do have a full top on, okay? So don't just think I'm sitting here naked. I'm not. I wanted to start by saying I have this script written out. So for me, it's important to be able to give factual information, but also to be able to give my own thoughts, opinions, feelings, and learnings from things that I have been going through the last couple of years. So I have it all mixed in here. I do have an article that I'm going to read. I want to preface by saying that I link all the articles in the description box below for if you want to reread or study it a bit further. Also, super important to, be giving credit where credit is due. Everything that's written down, lots of it is my own information. So I know some of you were saying that you like it better when I just say what I think. And legitimately, all the beginning part of last week's video about excitement, which if you hasn't watched, I'll link it here, was my own. And then I just simply read that article at the end. So I just wanted to let you guys know that, because I have had people say that if I don't have a script, then they think that I'm too repetitive and that the video takes too long. And that I should have a script. So now I have a script, but now you guys are saying that I am lacking my personality because I'm simply looking down and reading. So what I'm trying to say is please bear with me. I'm still very new to YouTube and to being in this space, and I'm doing the best I can. And it's very important for me to obviously put my own info, but to give actual facts as well, so that you're not thinking oh, she's just saying some serious BS now in this video. So I am committed to getting better as I grow and tweaking as I grow and learning new things and techniques as I grow. All I'm saying is please just have patience with me as we move through these moving pains, because I've only been doing this for a few months. So I'm still in diapers, legitimately, if you think about it. I'm just full of poo. So let's get started on this dreaded talk about dread, which I kind of thought, for me, what is the opposite of excitement? It's dread. So that's how we landed here on this topic today. So the actual definition of dread is to anticipate with great apprehension or fear. Jane was dreading the party. I was dreading this video. He can't swim and dreads going into the water. To be very unwilling to face something is dread. I dread Monday was the example. Lots of people, yeah, that's legit. You dread having to go back to work or whatever it may be. So the thing that we really have to keep in mind is that way, 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 way back in the day, we were beings who were legitimately existing to survive. We constantly had to protect ourselves against the elements, against animals, against natural disasters, against other tribes, and so on and so on. Because of that, our brains naturally focus on quote unquote negative emotions as a means of survival and protection. Please remember that no emotions are negative. They simply exist as indicators that something may be off, or back in the day that you were in imminent danger or that there was a threat around. Nowadays, life is very different, and the things we must survive in most cases are not physical attacks. For many of us, the dominant emotions we experience day to day are those of dread and anxiety. There are what cycles in the back of our brains on a daily basis, if not multiple times a day. So it's not usually just like once a day. You're like, oh, I dread just this one thing. Let me move on. Or whatever quote unquote negative emotions it is. They're constantly back there cycling. And you can feel like that hamster wheel I talked about before, where you're like, oh my goodness, like, I have no relief. I'm just full of all these thoughts constantly. And it feels like very overwhelming. In our brain's hamster wheel, we are terrified of being sacked or having done something wrong at work or losing our relationship or being accused and then humiliated by society. Maybe even potentially of something we didn't do or something that we did do. So now I'm going to read an article called Are Feelings of Dread Holding You Hostage? Because legitimately, they honestly can. Again, I've linked the article in the description box below. That was a hard word to get about, description. So let us begin. If I am killed, I can die but once. But to live in constant dread of it is to die over and over again. Abraham Lincoln. Something did happen to me somewhere that robbed me of the confidence and courage and left me with a fear of discovery and change and a positive dread of everything unknown that may occur. Joseph Heller. So I don't know about you guys, but both of those, I can't even think what that's called. Both of those quotes are very legitimate. And a lot of the time when something bad happens, it's easy to just cycle that in your head and just be waiting in almost anticipation of the dread that it might happen again, which we will talk about later. It goes on to say, I recently came across the above quote by Joseph Heller and it hit me right in my very depths. I remember as a child actively learning to, in essence, feel constant dread as I taught myself to avoid disappointment and failure by always anticipating the worst. That way, when it came to be, I wouldn't be devastated, just fatalistically accepting. It gave me a sense of control when I felt none. In doing, I, like Joseph Heller, set into motion a lifelong habit of dreading just about everything. In fact, it has so pervaded my thinking that I have often observed myself dreading a fun or enjoyable event, just because it is my habit to do so. So, can you guys relate to that? I'm thinking most likely the case. The above description might not be exactly true for you. I hope it is not, but it is a common state for many people in our culture. Most of us were not taught to deal with adversity in a healthy way. So we learned and taught ourselves how to avoid pain. As for me, as I've gotten older, gone through several rounds of psychotherapy and explored many different spiritual traditions, for help with dread, I have learned to work with the feelings. I have also helped many people deal with these same kinds of feelings. So what worked? I think a great Sufi poet, Rumi, expressed it best in his poem, The Guest House. And this is just an excerpt of it. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Most of us spend a lot of our time fighting this sense of dread, feeling powerless to combat it and completely at its whim. We push it away only to find it resurface at just the wrong time. Once you recognize this cycle, you can simply accept this dread that it is so often present instead of fighting it off. When it arrives, allow it to be there without beating yourself up. Take some deep yogic breaths and quiet your mind a bit, then ask yourself some simple questions. Are there any data to support this feeling of dread? Is there really anything to be afraid of in this particular circumstance? Even if you clearly identify the fear, ask yourself, what is the worst case scenario? Would I be okay if that happened? Would it change who I am, or would it just be a challenge? Most of the time, when I answer these questions honestly, I realize that my fear has been exaggerated in my mind. You guys, am a professional at exaggerating fear in my mind. I'm gonna stop to tell a quick story quickly about this. So the first time I went to go get a tattoo, I was getting it done on my ribs, which is a very painful place to get a tattoo. So I was getting two done. I got my ribs and then I got my wrists done. And I always prepare myself for the worst case scenario, because then in the case where that happens, I'm okay. And in the case where it's not that bad, then I walk away from the experience being like, oh, that was nothing, totally no big deal. So I went to get this tattoo. I knew that ribs was supposed to be a very painful place. I literally walked into the tattoo shop thinking, guys, I'm not exaggerating, I thought that I was going to die. That's what I convinced myself of. I'm going to get this tattoo and I am going to be in so much pain, I'm going to die. I'm not going to tell him to stop because I'm not going to be a sissy like that, but I am going to die and I'm not going to survive. And I told this man when I was about to get the tattoo, I know I'm going to die. This is going to be too painful to die. Amy, if you're watching, who is my most amazing tattoo artist, is going to laugh so hard because I literally sit when I get a tattoo. It's no big deal. But I thought I was going to die. He said to me, maybe we should start with your wrist and not your ribs, because if you can't handle it, then it's easy to just not do the ribs. And I was like, no, dude, we need to start with the ribs, because I'm not going to pussy out within any of it. Once we start, we're going until the end. So I drastically exaggerate fear and the situations that could happen through it. Back to the article, guys. Oh, and then also I should say, when he started, yeah, it was painful, but I literally looked at him and I was like, that's all it is. I thought I was gonna die, and it just is eh? And he was like, yeah, that's all it is. So just think about any times in your life where potentially you have done the same thing and made things seem so much worse and caused yourself so much more dread and anxiety because of doing that. Back to the article. I realize that I am capable of handling whatever happens, and that I am just afraid of what I don't know, or perhaps of pain or rejection. Once I have softened my rigid response, I feel less dread and can tolerate whatever still lingers. And by the way, it often does not miraculously disappear. That is legit. Ask yourself, is anything happening to me right now? Usually the answer is no. The dread is arising from some anticipated event in the future. You can then take a few breaths and remind yourself that your monkey mind is hijacking the moment instead of allowing you to be present in this moment. And guys, being present is the key. Literally, if we just focused on presence, we would realize that the past literally doesn't exist anymore, and the future literally 2 seconds from now even isn't guaranteed. So why are we spending all this time in the dread? And if we could just live in the now, in the very present, our lives would look and feel completely different. I often bring my attention to the sensation in my body or something beautiful in my immediate environment that grounds me in the reality of that moment. And I quickly realize I have nothing to fear but fear itself. We really should spend a lot more time just being fearful of being in fear, because it is it's so toxic to exist living in fear all the time. It literally robs us of any joy or excitement or positive form of emotion that we could be experiencing at that time. The more I have practiced this, the more I have been able to work with the dread and not allow it to disable me from fully living. There are days when I have to go through the above steps many times, and yet others where I'm fully engaged moment by moment and don't have the time for dread. Next time you can't get out of dread, try teaching yourself that you can. Once you loosen your attachment to the feelings, they have way less power over you than you might think. So I want to talk about something quickly. I was actually talking with my cousin this morning about dread, and she had a really great point. So thanks, Tania. She had a son, and he was born with some pretty serious health complications and has gone through a bunch of really scary surgeries, starting basically as soon as he was born. And when I told her I was making a video about dread, she said that for her, dread is seeing like the silver hospital doors. And it hit me like, that is so true. And I don't know if you guys have ever had a loved one be sick or in the hospital or have to go for any form of surgery, but like if you have and you think about that moment, it is so insanely dreadful. And she had a really amazing point that a lot of the time dread is linked to very traumatic events. And so for myself, when I think about that, my husband over the last couple of years has ended up in the hospital a few times and needed a few surgeries, and I legitimately dread that. Like, I think about it, I really try not to live in those moments of fear and dread, because there's a very good chance it might not ever happen again. And then imagine just existing in that energy, in that space all the time, and stealing those moments away from yourself where you could be focusing on other things or experiencing other things that are much better than dread. But when I do think about it, I get serious dread and anxiety thinking about the what if of if this happens again, or if he gets sick again and we end up in the hospital again. And it literally, like for me, I experience it even in my breath, where like I notice my chest gets really tight and I feel like I can't breathe properly. And it is horrible to exist in there. Or any other like traumatic event that you have been through in life. If you think about that and you bring back those memories and those thoughts and those emotions, it's most likely the case that you will start dreading that happening again, or almost being in like anticipation of it happening and occurring again. Just know that that is like a normal part of the human experience. It doesn't mean it's like super nice, but if you do experience that, where maybe you have gone through something very traumatic, that you have dread about that, please know that is so normal. But again, it's up to us to really use the tools. So whether it be something from this article or something that you find works for you, to find those tools and be able to use them, so that once we recognize the dread and it triggers us in our brain, that we can start to work at like a more rapid speed to shut that dread down and move back into a place of love and of faith and of trusting, you know, that everything happens for a reason, even if sometimes it's very hard to deal with. It does happen for a reason, and to just trust that things do always work out the way that they are meant to, even when sometimes we can't initially see it, or we don't like it, or it's very hard to deal with. But I would really encourage you to start figuring out tools that work for you to really pull yourself out of those traumatic moments of dread. For myself, I have really come to learn that some people or situations in life that you dread can easily be changed or removed from your life, so you no longer have to live with that dread. That being said, some things really cannot. In those cases, for myself, The best way to work through the dread is to move through it as quickly as possible. Literally, you guys, I used to be the person that put things off all the time. Oh, let me not deal with it. Let me not deal with it. I'm dreading this, blah, blah. I would drag things out for so long, and all I did was create more and more and more dread, more worry, more fear, more anxiety, to the point that I would like physically make myself sick from it, instead of just realizing this is one moment. I know I can get myself through. I know that so far, out of everything I have gone through in life, and you guys, it has been a lot, I have always made it out, and I have always survived, and I have always come back to a point of thriving. So let me just legit rip this like a Band-Aid and get it done and get it over with, so that this one moment of dread is only staying a moment and not becoming a day, a week, a lifetime. Because our moods and our days, we can choose to sit and exist in negative emotions and moods, or we can choose to allow it to only exist for a moment or a minute and then move on. We get to choose how our day looks in the end. If it's a phone call or uncomfortable conversation, have it as quickly as possible. Do not ignore the call, because then dread doubles. Now you still dread the call, and also dread the fact that it's slapping you in the face, asking you to be dealt with, and you're sitting there thinking, I have to phone this person back, or I have to text them, or I have to return this email, instead of having just like done it in the first place. Just pick up the phone and like get it over with. The thought of having to call back will make me feel extreme dread, as well as anxiety, fear, all those things that we don't want to feel. Remember, we create our reality. Do you want yours to be full of dread and negativity, or of peace and love? Like, legitimately, guys, I'm going to ask you that again, because these are the questions that really help me when I am in it. Do I want my life to exist around dread and negativity, or do I want to come back and be centered in peace and love? What's most important to you? What are your values? Where do they lie? Legitimately ask yourself that. Take some deep meditative breaths. I'm not kidding. There is so much power in your breath. Ground yourself and then act in accordance with what you want your life to look like, not what the dread is dictating for you. Because those are two totally different things. The dread is always going to come, but you get to decide what place it has in your life, and you get to decide how much power you give it, because the more time, attention, and thought that we give it, the more power we give it, and the stronger that it becomes. So I would encourage you to stand in your power, know who you are, know your worth, know your value, know that you choose what you get to accept into your life, and just move the F on, guys. So I wanted to thank you all so much for joining me this week, as always. If this was your first time here, thank you for watching. Also, if you are a regular, thank you for joining me weekly. I love spending time with you guys. Please make sure to subscribe to my channel. Click the all button so that you get notified every time I upload a video. Please make sure to like this video if you did. And as always, comment below. Especially comment any emotions that you want me to unpack for you guys. Let me know below, please. It's going to be very helpful for me to get a better indication of where we should be taking this and what you guys are enjoying. And I just love you guys all so much. It literally robs. Click the all button.